Are live for our show. We're going to just start a little bit with a little good advice, bad advice, and worse advice on prioritizing your security program. I'll start with you, Ben. Give me just some basic good advice on prioritizing security.
Consider the importance of your assets you're trying to protect.
That's some good advice. Now, Ed, give me some bad advice.
Remediate in order of how pretty the logo associated with a vulnerability is.
Each vulnerability has its own logo?
All the good ones do.
Ben, give me some worse advice than that.
Prioritize on the frequency of that logo appearing in Krebs on security.
I like it. Let's begin the show.
Get ready. It's Super Cyber Friday.
Welcome, everybody. It is Super Cyber Friday. Today's topic is hacking prioritization, an hour of critical thinking about which security holes need to be filled and, well, which ones do not. Our two guests, you just saw them seconds ago. That's Ben Shapiro. He's the head of technology risk, and he's also the CISO over at Canada Life. And also Ed Bellis. You've seen him many times here. He's the CTO and co-founder of Canada Security. They're now part of Cisco. We take full credit for that merger happening. Our sponsor is Canada Security, and they have been just nothing but spectacular sponsors of the CISO series, and we greatly appreciate that. 7 different ways you can participate. We have the chat room. Many of you have discovered that already. Also, submit a how not to prioritize your security, of which we got 2 really bad ideas right there. You can't use them. Come up with your own. Submit, how do we make prioritization 10% better? We're not looking for the grand solution all at once, but what's your tiny little tip to improve prioritization? We want to hear it from you. Vote in the polls. Join us on video at any time with Bring Me On. Not enough people do that. We welcome you to come on, and Andrew, the producer, will try to get on as many of you as possible. Ask a question anytime. Vote for your favorite question as well. The question is at the very bottom of the screen as well. All right, slightly different change in schedule today. First, we did our good advice, bad advice, worse advice. Get your how not to prioritize in security and your 10% better tips in right now. Make sure you label them bad idea for the bad ideas and 10% for the good ideas. We are going to play the public interest. We played that last week. That's our brand new game. We'll have that going, and we will have our poll live soon after that for how not to prioritize your security. Soon after that, we'll play That Totally Sucks. That's actually going to be connected to our public interest game. We've only played that game a couple of times, actually. And then we'll play, we'll go back to questions, then play Department of Yes, and then we'll put our poll live for how do we make it 10% better. And the top 2 worst idea contenders who we were playing with in Department of Yes will come on to face off. And then we'll have last question, final advice. And then we will do our meetup, which is a ton of fun. If you haven't participated in that before, you are missing out. So stick around for that. That's at the very end of the hour. We get some face-to-face time with everybody. Next Friday, our subject is hacking proactive security, an hour of critical thinking about continually testing your defenses to improve your security posture. Guess what? The link to register for that is at the very bottom of the screen. Go ahead and click on that and register for next week. It will not take you out of this video chat, this Super Cyber Friday. Please do that. And if you do register by next Tuesday, you are automatically entered in raffle to win an awesome CISO Series jacket, and that is with the brand new CISO Series logo. All right, let's begin our conversation. Please get your questions in right away, and I'm going to start with you, Ed. And I have quoted you so many times on the following that you have said to me. So I'm 2 things. I'm interested to know where you come up with this number and why this number exists. And you have said many times, you can ignore 60 to 70% of your vulnerabilities. Where does this come from, and why do you believe that?
Yeah, so it comes from, and if, for anyone who hasn't seen it, we do a series of joint research reports with the Scienti Institute. So Wade Baker, Jay Jacobs, and all those former Verizon DBIR folks. And what we did was analyze all of the data, all of the CVEs in the National Vulnerability Database. And then we looked and said, okay, so how many of these either have some sort of weaponized exploit, whether that be a proof of concept or point, click, and shoot easy, or a kit that's being sold to exploit them, or that we are actually seeing any sort of successful exploitation activity in the wild for. And that number is somewhere between, on any given year, 20 to 25% of vulnerabilities. Now, there's some factors that we'll go into that we say. Now, there are other factors that basically say this vulnerability is likely to be weaponized in the future, which ultimately leads it to be important. But it is very consistent that about 20 to 25% of all vulnerabilities have some sort of either exploitation activity or some sort of weaponized code to exploit those vulnerabilities.
And that is, I'm assuming that's, how is that some way alerted? Like, these is 25% you need to pay attention to, and just completely ignore this. How? And I'm assuming through your own application, through security. Yeah.
Sure. I mean, without it going into a sales pitch, there's a lot of data sources out there that will tell you about things like this. We pull in some of those data sources. Some of them are public, some of them are not. But a great example is Department of Homeland Security, CISA, now publishes this on a fairly regular basis, a list of vulnerabilities that they are aware of that are being exploited in the wild. And that list grows, and they're constantly publishing additional updates to that as well. So that's one of several sources that are out there.
I want to point on some bad idea. Just saying, saw came in from Hadassah of only prioritize after an exploit. We have seen and heard stories of companies getting like hit with ransomware, not fixing the thing that they were ransomware with, and getting hammered again. That really isn't that bad of a bad idea, is it, Ed?
It's not. It's root cause analysis, right? I would boil that down to, instead of just, papering over the problem and getting hit again, is what was the root cause of me getting hit by this ransomware?
Yeah.
And if it was an exploitive vulnerability, as an example, then maybe you want to go out and patch that vulnerability as part of your cleanup.
Do you have you ever seen a case, Ben, where the far too much stuff is done after the fact in terms of cleanup?
A certain very large incident response firm wouldn't exist if that didn't happen. So, yeah.
Okay. All right. So let me ask you about your paying attention and ignoring vulnerabilities. Do you sort of follow the same procedure as Ed was putting out there, in the sense that, just pay attention to what's active out there, ignore what's not active?
So I, big follower of the idea for a long time, but the execution is something that, we're still working towards. Absolutely, if something's being actively exploited, if we're from our intelligence sources, various places that we consult with, we are hearing about active exploitation out on the internet, then absolutely we're going to move very quickly on that one. But if we're not hearing about active exploitation, there's still this idea of a security promise where we expect that our systems have a certain sort of security qualities and that they're reasonably resilient against attack, that the controls we put in place work, and that there aren't flaws in those controls that are bypassable. So it's not only patch these things and ignore everything else, and certainly that wouldn't be what a normative practice would be, but rather prioritize as much as you can towards the things that are under active exploitation. But then once you've done those on an urgent basis, then come back and clean up everything else on a more careful basis, where you can go through all of the very careful testing and change management you want to do. Not that you're not going to do change management on the first ones, you're just going to move a lot faster through it.
Good question that came in from Richard Yu, who says prioritization that is risk-based, which I know this is your methodology, Ed, and Ben, for that matter. How best do you sell this to executives who have not yet set a cyber risk appetite? I mean, I'm assuming just start from the top and go down. Is there any other way? What do you think, Ed?
So yes, there are a few ways. In fact, we go through this all the time, and part of it is cultural. Part of it is, frankly, is they already get risk-based. They want to do it. They understand the value of it. Even the execs, in some cases, understand the value of that. In fact, sometimes it's the other way around, where the execs are looking to go more risk-based, where the further down you go, the more mired in the weeds they might be with something like a CBSS or something. That said, part of the factors are compliance, right? But we've got this process in place, and our auditors judge us based on a CBSS score or by an internal risk ranking or by whatever the existing process is, right? So you have to, the biggest one of the biggest challenges, and Ben can probably speak directly to this, having lived through these things, is the change management around the process, right? So being able to say, all right, we used to do it this way. There's reporting that goes out this way. There's compliance and audit that require it this way. How do I move to this risk-based approach? On the ops side, oftentimes it's an easy sell for us, right? We basically say, look, we're going to reduce risk, but in the process of reducing risk, you might actually have to do less work than you're doing now as far as remediation goes. So let's start there. So that's a different selling process than it might be on the security compliance or up the exec ranks.
Ben, does that ever happen? You're going to do less work than you're having now? Because everyone finds more work, even if they're doing less in one specific area. Yes? That's it's a fantasy.
It's like a fire department, and I'm stealing a friend's metaphor. It's like a fire department, and you can only save so many cats in the tree. But if you remove the thresholds around and you take some work away, there's still more cats to get out of the tree later on. Mm-hmm. I don't think I've had in my entire history an organization that I've worked at or with, depending on the role I was in, where there's not been somebody senior in the organization and also peers and technology practitioners going, are we being risk prioritized? Like, they truly want to know that. And so I've never had a conversation where somebody says, well, we have to patch it all every time. Is this the right thing to be doing from a risk basis? And methodologies where we can talk about what is being actively exploited, what poses the most risk to the organization, have been really helpful in there. I think the only time that people tend to get hung up on, Ed, you raised the idea of the compliance check mark, is when you've written your standards to a point that aren't achievable, versus saying, hey, my standard is that I will prioritize my efforts towards that which is actively being exploited on the assets that matter most, and then here's what I'll do about everything else. Mm-hmm. And the moment management signs off on that and says, yes, we agree that these are the standards, the auditors, they may have some concerns given, I'll call it doctrine that they're used to. But if this is what management has agreed to and you're living to it, then most of those concerns go away from a regulatory and governance perspective.
What about the issue, and this is one of those after the fact things where, when a breach happens or an incident happens, they do the forensics, the investigation. They go, oh, this was a vulnerability that had been exposed, and it was a known vulnerability, and they didn't patch it. The question is, how much should they be blamed? If it were in the 60 to 70% range that is not active, maybe we don't blame them. But if it was very high priority, we should blame them. Like, where does blame lie? And I know that a lot of people want to continue to blame at that point, even though, we're saying, well, we shouldn't blame, we should just fix. Ed, what do you say in situations like this? And by the way, have you had situations where clients, like, they'd been alerted about something and they didn't get to it, or it wasn't prioritized, or whatnot?
Yeah. So one, I hate the blame game as well. Mm-hmm. And I would also say, after every breach, there's a million people out there pointing, well, they should have done this and they should have done that. And I warned them 12 months ago or whatever. And that's because they can't do everything, right? So that's part of the problem. Now, I would also argue that probably the most common way to prioritize vulnerabilities today is the common vulnerability scoring system. And if you look at the distribution of the common vulnerability scoring system, the average score of any vulnerability of the 200,000 plus vulnerabilities that are out there is 7 and above, which is a high. And we can also talk about the fact that when we look at an organization's capacity to remediate vulnerabilities, they can, on average, regardless of size, they're able to fix about 15% of their vulnerabilities. The best of the best, the top performers, are somewhere around 30 to 35%, meaning 60 to 65, 70% of them are left open. If I'm fixing 30% of my vulnerabilities, that means even if I'm working from trying to fix all of the CVSS highs, I can't, right? I literally can't. There's not enough. So there's always going to be somebody who's going to come out after the fact and say, this was a CVSS 8 and you guys didn't fix it and you got breached and I told you, and these sort of things happen.
By the way, I don't even know if this happened. Do insurance companies refuse to pay if it was something that was known beforehand? Does this happen? I don't even know. Like
well,
you were known about this, you didn't fix it, we don't have to pay or something. I mean, again, I'm just making things up. I have no idea. Does this
So
crap
I want to be
happen?
really clear. I work for a life and health insurance company, but in conversations with insurance underwriters at organizations that deal with property and casualty, including cyber claims, the places where they're going to say that they're not going to pay, and there seems to be sort of this theory within the information security community of the insurers don't want to pay, and I generally don't think that's true. They do, provided that the policy is correctly formulated and underwritten. And so where you're going to see not pay is if you presented, let's say, we fix 100% of our vulnerabilities within 2 days. Let's say somebody said that. And then you go to your insurance underwriter and you say, I'd like a $5 million policy. And they say they hear you do that, and they hear you do other things, multi-factor, whatever it might be. Great, fantastic. And then 6 months later, you have a breach, and surprise, surprise, where you claim that you would fix 100% of your vulnerabilities in 2 days. No, you're not actually doing that. It's not, if you told them up front, hey, I do, as Ed suggested, 15% or 30%, whatever the organization is capable of, and you're clear on that, they really have no basis to deny the claim.
All right.
But talk to your lawyer, please.
Yes, he's not a lawyer. Wait.
It's time to play a brand new game.
All right, it's not brand new because we played this last week, but that's the bumper that I currently have because we didn't actually create a bumper for this. But for those of you who were here with us last week, you got a chance to play this game. And guess what? We're playing it again, so you can play the audience around. And just so you know, the number that you get correct now will carry over to our next game, That Totally Sucks, which we'll play a few minutes later. We'll have another question, and we'll play a few later. Oh, good. Questions are coming in, so we'll ask one of those after this game. All right. Here's how it works, everybody. You're going to tell me which one has the most average monthly search queries, and you're both going to answer on this. Security vulnerabilities or security threats. Ben and Ed, what do you think your answers are here?
Got to go with A.
A, you're saying A has got more monthly search queries. Ed, what do you think?
I'm going to go with B.
B?
Yep.
The audience hasn't gotten their answers in yet, but we're going to find out right now, and that is B. You are correct with double there, more than double there, right there. Okay, so 1 correct for Ed, 0 for Ben. 1, okay. Oh, there come the answers, A and B. They're all in.
Oh, after
all right,
the
here
fact.
we go.
Okay,
Here's a good one. DEF CON RSA. Which has the most average monthly search queries on this one? Ben.
DEF CON.
DEF CON.
Same.
Ed?
A.
A. Our audience is getting in. A lot of A's. Guess what? They're a dead heat.
No
Unbelievably.
way.
So we get the point.
You both get the point. Yes.
All right.
So 1 for Ben. 2. Everybody wins on this one. All right. That, by the way, when I saw that, I was just astonished by that.
I don't know, Ed. I think you need a data scientist to look at that.
That sounds suspect. Definitely an anomaly.
2 for Ed. 1 for Ben. All right. Most average monthly search queries, the two are security vulnerability and, critical vulnerability and security hole. What do you think, Ben?
Security hole, is that where I park my patch or something? I don't know. I'm going to go with A. I'm going to go with A.
A, critical vulnerability. What do you think, Ben? Security hole or critical vulnerability?
I'm going B.
Okay. A for Ben. B for Ed. And the correct answer is A, critical vulnerability wins. All right, we got a tie score here. It is 2-2. Yeah, 2-2. 2-2. All right, last one. Here we go. All right, and it is, what's more search queries, Patch Tuesday or vulnerability management? What do you think, Ben?
A.
A, Patch Tuesday? Ed, what do you think? Patch Tuesday?
I know that there's certainly a group of people at Cisco that bid a lot on B, but I'm going to go A.
AdWords. Go A?
Yes.
So both go A?
Yes.
Correct answer is A by a lot, too. A lot. Good job for both of you on that
I'll
one.
inform that team that they should be bidding on Patch
Yes.
Tuesday.
3-3. We're 3-3. Just confirmed, Andrew. So good job. You tied. You split on one of them, but you split. Great job to the audience as well. How did everyone do? Did everyone get all? How many people got all 4? Speak up if you got all 4 of those correct. I thought that was good. Did you like the game? Yes.
Yes.
Fun.
Good. All right. We're going to answer another question, then we're going to take this, then we're going to carry this over to That Totally Sucks. You know what? This is Roger Swanson asked a really, really basic question. And Ed, I'm going to throw this one to you because you should be able to answer this.
I'm good at basic
Can you explain the CVSS or vulnerability scale? What is it? Explain. What makes something a 10? What makes something lower?
So the common vulnerability scoring system actually there's two popular versions right now, version 3 and version 2. They also have different scores for what they call a base score, a temporal score, an environmental score. Almost everything that you see talked about with CVSS is the base score. And the base score is actually, it gets conflated with risk. It is not a risk score. It is a severity score. And what it does is there's a lot of subcomponents that make up the severity of how bad is this vulnerability, right? Is it network accessible? Is it involve information leakage? Is it privilege escalation? Is it remote code execution? All of these different things that feed into just how bad is this vulnerability, which, by the way, also speaks to the fact that why everything skews to the right or the higher end for the base score is because there's very little vulnerabilities that go, oh, this is a good thing, right? In fact, you almost see nothing below a 4 out of 10. So that is the CVSS.
So that wouldn't be considered a vulnerability if it's something below a 4. It's like, well, that's nothing.
Well, according to CVSS, I don't want to quote it. I'll end up being wrong, but I know that there's well over 80% of vulns are a 4 and above, right? And ironically, I remember way back in the day, I used to be the CISO at Orbitz. When PCI first came out, they had basically written into the standard that you must fix all vulnerabilities that are CVSS 4 and above at the time, which is basically saying you have to fix all of your vulnerabilities, or at least all of the ones that are in your cardholder environment.
But so something really interesting here about, and if you go look at first.org, which is the organization that publishes the standard, the math beneath it, there are values in there that have been iterated over time, so let's assume that they're trending towards better. But you have to ask yourself this question, why these values? Are they the correct values? And so there's some math inside CVSS that might say, well, this shouldn't be the only thing that you use to drive your decision making, because the math itself is sometimes a bit opaque to, the average security practitioner.
I agree with that, Ben. I would say I'm not a fan of the math, but the submetrics that feed into the math, I actually think there's some valuable components within there that you can use as part of your prioritization scheme.
All right, we're going to go to our next game.
Oh no, that totally sucks.
All right, so good news for both of you. You both got 3 correct. That means each of you only needs to pick 4. And it is up to our audience. Audience, pay attention. What's going to happen is they're going to pick 4. There are 11 bad things here and 1 good thing behind here, and they vary in badness, these 11 bad things behind each of these. And then when we're done, we're going to determine who has the worst environment. Is it Ed or Ben, depending on what they picked here. All right. So, Ed, I'll let you go first. Pick a number 1 through 12.
Well, we were talking about the Beatles earlier, so I'm going to go with number 9.
Number 9. I was thinking you go 4 for the Fab 4. So here we go. Number 9. 80% failure on company-wide phishing tests. That's not good. That's not good at all. All right, Ben, you pick one.
Lucky 7.
Lucky 7. We're going with 7. Here is your core networking switches are from Best Buy. That can't be that good. But again, these aren't horrible.
Not terrible.
Okay, so notice that I'm coloring some red and some blue. So Ben will be red, Ed will be blue. Ed, pick another one.
Let's go with number 1.
Number 1 is open port on firewall, get access to an IoT device. That could cause some problems. Not yet, but it could cause some problems. Ben.
3's a crowd.
3 is a crowd. We go with 3. Enabling of SSL decryption and firewalls. There you go. You got a good one there.
Is that the good one?
Wow. All right. Ed.
Let's go opposite, number 12.
Number 12. Here we go. Your entire Slack has been exposed.
That's more embarrassing than anything.
All right, Ben.
But this one goes to 11.
11. Okay, we're going to 11. Here we go. Oh, your application is leaking PII. That's never good.
No.
That's pretty bad, actually. You don't want that. All right, last one for both of you. Ed, pick one.
Oh, how about number 4?
Number 4. Now we're going to the Fab 4. Your employees are installing any software at Shadow IT, which pretty much that's probably happening anyways. All right, Ben, last one. Pick it.
Perfect 10.
Perfect 10. Here we go. Your SSO service. Hey, we saw this in the news, didn't we?
Too soon.
Too soon.
Too real. Yeah.
Too real. All right. We actually have the bad idea poll up. I didn't mention this. I'm sorry. My apology. But now we're also going to put up a poll that has both Ed's name and Ben's name. And I want everyone right now, because we don't want to do this up. It's up. Go look at the poll. It has Ed and Ben. I want you to say, of these 4 that each of them have, remember, Ben is red, Ed is blue. Who's got the worst environment? So just to remind you, Ed has the open port on firewall, gets access to the IoT device. He's got Shadow IT, 80% failure on phishing tests, and his entire Slack has been exposed. So nothing really has happened bad yet. But Ben has the SSO service announces a breach and the application is leaking PII. But he does have the enabling of SSL decryption and firewalls too as well. All right. Everyone's delayed a few seconds. So here, let me see how the voting is going.
Wait, so
right
I
now.
win if I get the worst environment or the better environment?
You get the worst. Although Ed is getting
everybody's a winner.
Ed, you're voting who is the worst environment. I hope everyone knows that you're voting the worst environment. So you may want to switch your votes. Yeah, it's changing now.
Come on, an SSO breach?
Well,
Come
no.
on.
Here we go. Ed, everyone thinks you have the worst environment. It looks like you're voting for the worst environment.
I wonder what they're putting in their Slack.
We'll see. Hold on. It's good. Hold on. It's going back and forth. This is actually kind of fascinating. Hold on. It's almost a dead heat. No, wait. Wait. It's a dead heat. No, it's not a dead heat.
Well,
hold on.
Well, Ed, they're running Shadow IT, so it's going to be.
Oh my God, this is amazing. I don't know if you're following this, but it's going back and forth. But it's a dead heat right now. It's not a dead heat. No, Ben, you're pulling ahead with the worst environment. We're settling on that. Ben, you win 14-12. You have the worst environment. They're playing. Oh, they're still voting. Keep going. Wait, now it's dead heat. No, Ed, you're ahead. No, oh no, wait. Ed, you're winning. We may I may need to come back to it. I'm going to let you keep voting on that, everybody, because remember, worst environment. Who has the worst environment? I'll come back to that. And also, please vote on your best bad ideas as well. Yeah. All right. You know what? There were questions about the publishing of these vulnerability scores, and I saw Sean Bowen had posted links to that. Scroll up, and you can see that as well. Good job, both of you, and by the way, good job voting, everybody, as well, because that's actually quite exciting watching it going back and forth. All right, let's go. I'm going to go to some of my questions. You get your questions in, and we're going to be playing Department of Yes in just a handful of minutes. So. Here's a post I saw. What is the value of tracking the latest attacks? I'm going to start with you, Ben. First, let me just ask, do the two of you go to the Black Hat conference at all? Yes or no? No, Ben?
Yes.
Ed, you go.
Requirement.
It is a requirement for you.
Yes.
All right. So here's the thing. What's the value of tracking the latest attacks? And I'm interested to know this. One post on Reddit argued that events like Black Hat, which are focused on telling you the latest and greatest threats, are useless to most security programs. The Redditor argued that the threats you were concerned about before you went to Black Hat are probably going to be the same ones you're going to be concerned about after Black Hat. I may have asked you this on the previous show, Ed. My apologies if I did. I'll start with you, Ed. Do you believe that to be true? What you were worried about before Black Hat is the same thing you should be worried about after Black Hat?
Yes, I absolutely do.
Okay.
In fact, I would. The irony of all this is probably the best Black Hat talk that I've seen was probably a dozen plus years ago by Alex Hutton and David Mortman at the time.
I know both.
And they were at the end of the conference. There was the last talk of the conference. They went through and basically showed you with data why the things that you just saw for the previous 2 days are not the things that you should worry about when you go home. That it's going to take time, right? And eventually some of that stuff might prop up as things that you're going to have to be worried about in 6 months or whenever the time frame is. I would also argue the stuff in Black Hat, I wouldn't necessarily call the latest threats, I'd call them the most interesting, right? Especially
Yes.
from an attacker standpoint. So that's kind of a big difference. Now, I do think measuring the latest threats in terms of volume and velocity of attacks and exploitations and
Yes.
stuff is super highly valuable. And that was valuable the day before Black Hat and still valuable the day after.
Right. All right, Ben, your thoughts on this?
Well, I think the fact that I don't attend Black Hat probably evidences a bit of my perspective on it. But
so you get to just worry continuously.
Pretty much. Well, I'm a CISO, so yeah. But if you think about the type of material that's released at Black Hat, and we've certainly seen over the years at Black Hat, there's been a bit of drama around O-Days being dropped at Black Hat and that being less of a thing. So really the material at Black Hat is, as you said, Ed, it's interesting stuff. And the way that I look at that is does that change my threat model? So I should include that into my long-term threat model and strategic planning. But because I'm not expecting any O-Days to be dropped at Black Hat, my vulnerability management program is not going to change before and after Black Hat unless somebody did something really unexpected in a talk.
All right. Let me ask one more question, then I'm going to actually give everyone a few more minutes. Oh, by the way, if you have not clicked the link at the bottom of the screen to register for next week, please do that. Remember, if you register for early, you're automatically entered in a raffle to win an awesome CISO Series jacket. So you want to do that. So please vote on the best bad idea for what not to do in prioritization. All right. What is the hardest part about prioritization, Ben?
The hardest part about prioritization, it's so many things that come to mind. But the one that I think really challenges me is the managing, given that there's so many different pieces of technology in the environment, sequencing the priority within the priority. And so, if you're dealing with Microsoft Patch Tuesday, let's say arbitrarily around the time of mid-December 2021. You've got a whole bunch of high and criticals dropping at the same time. And so then how do you sequence within that? Once you get out of those sort of hairy situations, then it's really an exercise of change management and scheduling. Mm-hmm. But the prioritization itself, if I really had to unpack it, it's a lack of future-looking, or data that informs us on a future-looking basis. And so then everything you just have to treat kind of blindly unless you adopt methodologies like Ed are describing.
Ed, same question to you, and maybe speak for your customers. What do they think is the hardest part?
So there's a few things. We touched a little bit on the process change itself, right? Change management around the process. That goes without saying. Getting
humans to do something different. It's just in anything, it's difficult.
Above and beyond that, though, there are other things. So one of the things I think about is in terms of how easy or hard something is. So Ben touched a little bit on Patch Tuesday, right? So one of the things that we see customers do is prioritization is one piece of the puzzle here, right? So when you're basically dealing with a problem that I can't fix everything, right? So how do I deal with that? And one of them is prioritization, and the other is automation. And I talk a lot about both. And what we often see customers do is they say there's a certain set of vulnerabilities, and maybe it's Patch Tuesday and using SCCM or whatever the case is. I'm just going to fix them all, right? It's going to be automated. There will be some human in the loop in terms of the change management process and testing and things like that. But I don't care if it's high risk, if it's low risk, whatever. We're just going to fix them all. But then you have this subset of vulnerabilities that are left over that I have to prioritize. And part of that prioritization process is all the stuff we've been talking about around, the threats and exploits and how important the asset is and everything else. But there's two other factors that you have to think about. And one is how difficult is this to fix, right? And you might be able to fix one that's a lot easier and one that might take you months to fix because of all the regression testing and everything that has to happen around it. In that case, you're probably going to choose the easier one. And then the other is the operational risk, which most of those things tend to go hand in hand, right? The ease of remediation. So what I mean by that is, as security people, we're always thinking about how do I reduce the security risk? But the sheer nature of patching or changing something in a production environment is going to introduce operational risk that the security person thinks a little less about. The ops team thinks a lot more about, and they're like, everything change that you're introducing here is it going to affect my uptime? Is something not going to come back? Am I going to have to revert? All of these different things as well. So I think all of those little tangentially things, the ease of remediation, the operational risk, all of these, the change management process or the change management around processes, those are the really things that especially large orgs tend to struggle with.
All right. Guess what?
Hello, welcome to the Department of Yes, where no request is ever rejected.
All right. We have two great bad ideas in here. And the way this game works, actually, Ben, you don't know, but essentially, the Department of No that security is so famously known as, and that's because they say no to good ideas. Well, you're going to do the opposite. I'm going to give you a bad idea, and you're forced to say yes. I'm going to make Ed play first because he knows exactly how to play this game. He's a complete pro at it. Again, you may not be facetious. I can't stress this enough. You got to find actually the silver lining in both of these. All right. Here's the first bad idea. And again, speak up if this is your bad idea, because we're going to want you on later for defending your horrible idea to be so horrible. Ed, make everything a top priority. Now, note that this would completely decimate the whole model of Kenna security if everything's a top priority.
Well, or it just makes our job pretty easy, right? We just...
What are the... All right. So why do you want to do this?
Because if you prioritize everything at the top, then you are absolutely certain that you are not going to miss anything that is important. And there's no way that somebody can come back to you after the fact of the breach that we discussed earlier and say, yeah, but you didn't prioritize that because you prioritized everything.
Yeah, but is it physically possible to get to everything?
We're talking about prioritization, man. Fixing is somebody else's job.
That was the correct answer right there. There you go. Ben, why do you want to do this?
Why do I want to do this? Well, wait, I can't be facetious? No? Okay.
No, because that's easy. That's
right.
easy.
Why do I want to do this? It will make my conversations about resourcing so much easier because everybody's going to be focusing on security and funding of that.
Oh, yeah! That's a good way of looking at it. I like that. That is Hadass. Hadass, you're going to be coming on later to defend your bad idea as being truly the worst bad idea. Now, here's the second one. Who will you be competing against? You'll be competing against the person who had this one. And I'll start with you, Ben. Only prioritize the risks that are disclosed in the media. Now, I'm going to say mainstream. I'm going to qualify that. Say mainstream media. So only prioritize risks that are disclosed in mainstream media. Why do you want to do this?
My executive will believe that I'm absolutely on top of my game in managing our risk.
Sir, yes, sir. I think that's a good way of looking at it. Ed, why do you want to do this?
I'll use data for this one. So in our most recent research report, Volume 8 specifically, we looked at a number of different ways to actually strategize your remediation and prioritize your remediation. And mentions in Twitter, which correlate a lot to things that are in the media, actually had a higher likelihood of remediating something that was eventually going to be exploited than using CVSS.
But that's cheating. You've taken a bad... No, he's taken a bad idea and actually proved it's a good idea.
So Craig Herder, that was his. Craig, you're going to have a hard time defending that being bad enough. Again, Hadass's bad idea. All right, the two of you are coming on in 7 minutes, 45 minutes past the hour. So kudos to Ed, by the way. I'm going to actually, I'm going to give you the winner bell on that.
We've got a winner.
All right, here's a good question. I like this one here. This came up not from our audience, but I had heard this before. Do organizations suffer from prioritization drift? Is this a thing? So they start with well-intentions, but they drift into the low-impact activities just because they're easier and you feel like you're doing something. Ed, does that actually happen?
Not only does it happen, we were talking about it a few minutes ago, right? Yeah. I would argue, though, that that's not necessarily a bad thing. I would say that with those two levers that I have, again, which is prioritization and then automation, there's certain things that I'm just going to take off the table, even if they're low. And by the way, there is a positive to doing that, even if it's a low risk of an exploitation. And that is 6 months from now, a vulnerability comes out in that piece of software that is highly exploitable. And I haven't patched for the last 6 months. That makes my job a lot harder to get to that rev, to get to a clean version. So there's pluses and minuses.
Prioritization drift. Have you run into this problem, Ben?
Yeah, especially if you're using sort of count of vulnerabilities as your measurement, then you're incentivized to get rid of everything that's easy to get rid of. And that tells a great story of, hey, look, I took it down from 1 million vulnerabilities to 900,000, but they were all lows. That doesn't really assess your risk or severity, I guess, either. So,
No, I mean, if it's easy, we like doing it. There's no question, and we just
if it's
do that.
all you do, that's the problem. If it's easy, sure, knock it out of the park.
But I'm more
on.
talking about the drift of, like, the thing is, it could take you all day to deal with 3 vulnerabilities, or you could set up some automation script to deal with 100,000, like, kind of a thing.
Right.
Like, we feel this sense of greater accomplishment with the 100,000, don't we?
Sure, because you've removed a material amount of something from your pile of bad.
Yes.
And I don't think there's anything wrong with automating your environments to fix 100,000 low.
Yeah.
If you can do that, great, but don't count that as done. That's just sort of underlying background to your overall program and focus.
All right. Good. No questions in. Get your questions in. We have just actually a few minutes. In 5 minutes, we're bringing on Hadass and Craig to defend their bad ideas. What are some evidence-based variables to track with prioritization? Like, what is the thing that allows you to make your prioritization list, Ben?
So what am I looking for when I'm prioritizing?
Yeah.
One, we're looking using our threat intelligence providers and other data sets that we get. We're looking for active exploitation because that really tells us that we want to accelerate pretty quickly. And then the next thing we're considering is the importance of the asset and also its accessibility and likelihood of contact with threat actors who are engaging in the attacks. Those are the data points that are going to help us determine whether or not we're going to fix sooner versus later.
And is there a way that you're combining that with, how, like, through kind of securities app, like, they've ranked these top, the 30, 25, 30% that are the most severe, and with your ranking, can you show, like, improvement over time that we're getting better at this and this is a better state? So, like, when you get that generic question of how secure are we, that you're showing some movement in a positive direction. It's like, how do you present that, I guess, is my question.
Well, maybe Ed should sell me a Kenna license. What do you think, Ed? But the short answer is yes, because we've got this agreement with management that the things that are the most important, the most critical, that are related to assets within a certain space, these are the ones we have to pay attention to, and we can show good performance relative to that.
Ed, what have you seen as sort of the best way to show sort of forward improvement?
Yeah, I mean, obviously, I'm a bit biased with the product at the same time, maybe, but ultimately, what you want to do is, and I've been on the practitioner side of this, is I want to be able to show, okay, so here's what my risk is today, and you're going to have to use some metrics. A lot of the stuff that Ben talking about is great. You got to talk about the threat landscape. And by the way, there's 2 factors that you're dealing with on the vulnerability prioritization, right? There's a lot of the stuff we've been talking about, which is mostly related to becoming a target of opportunity, right? So I've got a vulnerability that an attacker is going after. And then there's targeted attacks, and that's a different threat model. And you need to be aware of who's targeting you, your industry, targeting you because of who you are, not because of what you have in terms of vulnerabilities. That said, I need ground truth metrics to kind of help prioritize that. And ground truth metrics are great for things like successful exploitations in the wild and different things like that. I need to understand how important the assets are. I need to understand if those assets are exposed to the internet, what controls are around them to really deter this. Is there other ways to do this other than patch the vulnerability? I take all that into account to basically say, here is my current state of risk. Now, here as an organization is where we think we want to go. And I got to get agreement across management that this is where I want to be in 6 months, 12 months, 18 months, whatever the case might be. Here's what it's going to take for us to get there. Here's the funding that might be associated with that, or basically, this is our capacity today. If you want to reduce more risk, then it's going to cost Y, right? And then everybody's got to agree that that is the right thing to do. And then you go out to do that, measure that, come back, report on that, and continue that process. I don't know if I answered your question or not, David.
No, well, but you answered different issues regarding that. No, you got to it. You know what? As we're waiting for Hadass and Craig to come on, I'm going to ask you a quick question. And it's something we talked about just moments ago, cyber insurance. So does or should cyber insurance affect prioritization? This comes from Gabe Silva. What do you think, Ben?
No, cyber insurance is a conversation around what the overall capabilities in your organization are, and then how you desire to transfer some of that risk for the scenarios you can't reasonably protect against. Prioritization, if you protect, actually, I'll back that out a little bit. If your prioritization is absolutely stupid, then sure, it should affect your cyber insurance. But if you're taking something that's a risk-oriented approach, be it the CISA-driven approach, or of course, the studies that Ed and his team have been doing, then that seems like reasonable management and good risk governance. And so any insurer should look at that and go, yeah, you understand what's going on, and I'm happy to take your money and sell you a policy.
All right. We had Craig here just a second ago. That is Hadass, which is here. By the way, we recorded an episode of CISO Series podcast with Hadass that's actually not going to air until May, but she was awesome. I will just say that. She was great. And there is Craig. All right. So if I remember correctly, Hadass, and there goes Craig. What the heck is happening here? If I remember correctly, Hadass's bad idea was prioritize everything, and Craig's was only prioritize what's mentioned in the media. And as soon as we can get him back, I would like you, Hadass, to argue why your idea is far worse than Craig's, and vice versa. I would like him to do the same thing. Don't go anywhere, Craig. Stay where you are. Craig, can you hear us? Yes, you can.
Yes, I can.
Did you hear what I was just saying moments
No,
ago?
I did not.
All right. You know what Hadass's bad idea is. It's prioritize everything. Yours is prioritize only what's mentioned in the media. And I qualify to do mainstream media, which I think is better. So Hadass, you have to tear apart Craig as to why his idea is not nearly as bad as yours, and vice versa. Craig, you do to Hadass. And Ed and Ben, you will be the final arbiters to determine who truly has the worst bad idea of the two of them. Hadass, you may begin.
Well, I get to go first? Okay, great.
Yes.
My idea is worse because at least Craig is prioritizing something. When you prioritize everything, nothing is prioritized. But at least with his idea, something is prioritized and something can be taken care of. But when everything is prioritized, nothing gets done.
Good point. All right. Now, Craig, if you remember what Ed said earlier, he actually made quite a good argument for your bad idea.
He
making
did.
it quite a good idea. So you've got a hole
Craig.
to dig yourself out of here.
Well, here's how I dig myself out of. The media is not always looking at cutting edge issues. They're also not looking at the situations that affect my organization. Following the media to determine your prioritization is really an exercise in PR and not an exercise in prioritization. It's trying to make yourself look good so that you don't show up in what the news determines to be valid, but it's not really looking at what my top vulnerabilities in fact are. Because I may have something that's not newsworthy. I may have 2003 servers. I may have 1,000 2003 servers sitting on my environment, but they're never going to be in the news because the news isn't going to look at patching and making sure that I'm running the most up-to-date versions of software. So Hadass's idea is
to a board and a C-suite, then making yourself look good based on the media probably works in your favor as well. And you can also get funding when you're like, hey, did you hear the latest thing that's happening in the news? And I need money to prioritize this. And they're more likely to give it to you because they have heard of it. Whereas if I'm just saying, hey, everything in our environment is a problem, they're going to be like, la, 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 I can't hear you.
All right.
Sure, that's fair. Let's turn this into a game of I object. But I think that yours is accurate, but you're still prioritizing things across the board, and some of your prioritization may still be media based. So you are in fact supporting my idea, whether you're doing it directly or not.
I'm prioritizing everything. It's all equally important.
All right. Well, I have to call it here. I'm going to let Ben and Ed decide here. By the way, spectacular arguments, both of you. I loved both of them. Ben, Ed, which one truly has the worst idea? I'll start with you, Ben.
Craig, I'm sorry, but I'm a sucker for Hadass's construction of the logical argument of you are still prioritizing, and then I'm sorry, Ed didn't do you any favors. He demonstrated your bad idea is actually a good idea, so I'm going to give it to Hadass.
All right, Hadass wins this. Ed?
So as much as I first off, Craig's idea is not a good idea. It's a better idea than some things, but it's not a good idea. But Hadassah's idea is the worst one because it's been proven 100% over and over again. It's impossible to do, which means if you do prioritize everything, you are basically prioritizing nothing.
There you go. Good point. Hadass, good job. By the way, Craig, Ed set you up for failure. You got to blame him. All right. Thank you, both of you. Thank you for joining us for that. All right. We have how much time? We have less than 10 minutes left. I want to remind everybody, please click that link at the bottom of the screen to register for next week's video chat. That is going to disappear in 5 minutes. And I want you to have the opportunity to register. Remember, if you register now, you're entered into the raffle as well. So please do that. Please. And also, you can always just go to crowdcast.io/CISO series. In fact, Andrew, would you type that in there? And you can see all our future events coming up, and you could register for any and all if you would like. All right, let's just go. We put our 10% better poll up there, and I'll just sort of address some of these. These are just tips to improve prioritization, and I just want to call out the one that's getting a lot of votes. Align with business needs and priorities. Also a good way to get funding. How can you sort of construct that for me, Ben, of like how you're actually the mechanics of aligning a vulnerability prioritization with the business needs and priority? Like, just give me a example. You don't have to give me a ton, but a good concrete example would be great here.
Sure. Business impact assessments. These are the technologies that are most important to sustaining our business in the event of a sort of a contingency scenario, a DR event. And so if we already have that information that these are the most important things to the business, then that's our hunting ground for where we want to put more energy into our prioritization versus things that are less consequential to the business.
Ed?
Without a doubt. I mean, everything Ben said is absolutely true. I would add to it and say, think about it beyond just the data of it. Like this is really sensitive data, so it's super important to us. Versus this is public data, and who cares what everybody gets? Because you have to think about it through the lens of the business, not necessarily just the data. So an example would be, I use this example all the time, good or bad. Our public website, right? It's public. Everybody has access to it. Who cares if somebody steals the data? There's nothing to steal, right? But if somebody was to compromise that and say upload malware and then used our website to attack our customers, that becomes highly problematic for our business, right? So,
right. So understanding the actual vectors, not just the entity of itself.
Yeah, absolutely. And not just thinking about it through the lens of data, but thinking about it through the lens of the business value, as Ben was talking about earlier.
Yeah.
Excellent point. All right. Let me ask one more question, then I want to do our wrap up. Has anything changed drastically? Let's just put a time of like 2-3 years recently. Has anything changed drastically in the last 2-3 years of prioritizing vulnerabilities for you, Ben? Or is it really just a lot of the same? What's changed, you think?
So two things. The first one is that there's been a bit of a decoupling between this is hard to fix, so should we fix it? And that conflict with the vulnerability management program. The vulnerability management program primary objective is to identify the issue, whatever it might be, communicate it, and then continue to track it towards hopefully a successful treatment. And so, whereas before I would have heard the argument where people are saying, hey, you're asking me to do something that's really hard, let me go do the easy stuff instead. Rather, there's a recognition now of being able to run technology at scale requires automation, requires patterns. And so that conversation has become easier where we're saying, go fix it. And it's about the issues about whether or not they have automation and good change management and good patterns and all of those things versus, you're asking me to do something hard. So that's the one big change that I've really enjoyed over the last little bit, where people have recognized they need to be able to scale their IT management, and that has had a net benefit for vulnerability management. The other thing...
So just more visibility in general, too.
More visibility, but also a recognition of around what scalable technology management looks like as we're constrained on resourcing across the world. Yeah. Hey, I have to automate things. I want to go to the cloud. That requires different technology management patterns. And that has had an implicit or sort of an unexpected benefit for vulnerability management because people are having to operate at scale and learn how to do that. The other thing that's been really great has, we would bemoan as a profession for many years the lack of data, loss tables, in insurance terms and so on. I think we're actually starting to see some analysis, and a hat tip to the folks over at Scientia. Big fan of the work that they do. They're actually demonstrating that we now have good data, enough data to have informed conversations about risk. And so that loss table, I don't know the long tail, I don't know what this looks like, it's starting to go away. And I think that's driving some really informed conversations, and so I'm really happy to be here and now in my role, being able to access that information.
Ben, give me a quick answer, and then I'm going to wrap this sucker up. Not Ben, I'm sorry, Ed. Quick answer, and I'm going to wrap this sucker up. What do you think has been the biggest change in the last couple of years?
Well, I'll give you a quick answer and piggyback right on especially that second half of what Ben was talking about, right? The availability of data, the lens of applying risk to all of this instead of counting vulnerabilities or looking at just severity has shifted dramatically over the last several years. Probably, I've been close to it enough to see it slowly trickle over time, but if I was just to compare what everybody does today versus what they were doing 4 or 5 years ago, I would say it's dramatically different, largely because of a lot of the data sets that become available and a lot of the analysis that's been publicly done. I'll throw a plug out there even for first.org was mentioned earlier. There's something called the exploit prediction scoring system, which is based on a lot of this data that hangs off of first.org, where we use a lot of this data that is now publicly available to predict exploitations in the future.
Very good. All right, let's wrap this show up. We're just going to be with us a few minutes. Stick around, everybody, because first I want to mention Ed's company, Kenna Security. Thank you so much for sponsoring this very episode of Super Cyber Friday. We greatly appreciate Kenna Security's spectacular support. They are part of Cisco now. Now, I already mentioned the next week's event. We're taking that away now because did I not hold it? Wait, where did I put? I think I took the link away. Change the link at the bottom of the screen. Change the link at the bottom of the screen to our thing, or maybe I'll mention it in a second. I forget where it is in my chart. Our link at the bottom of the screen is the cybersecurity meetup. Go ahead and click on that now because we're all going to be over there right after that for a half hour for a chance to meet with each other. If you have never done this before, do not be shy. Please join us. We are a very friendly group. You'll see you'll be a floating head. You can connect with each other, and it'll be a lot of fun. Now, in 90 minutes from now, we are going to have our Cybersecurity Headlines Week in Review. That's 3:30 p.m. Eastern, 12:30 p.m. Pacific. We will have John Prokop, the CISO of the Success Academy Charter Schools, who will be on as our guest, providing some context for this news this week. And I believe Okta was in the news this week. I believe. I'm not sure, but we'll double check on that. So stick around for their meetup. Yes, there it is. I forget where I put it in this presentation. Click the link at the bottom of the screen to participate in that. And tell your friends to join us. We do it every Friday at 1 p.m. Eastern, 10 a.m. Pacific, although there's going to be 2 weeks in April where we're going to be off. But pretty much every other Friday we do this. And then lastly, do you want to sponsor Super Cyber Friday? Guess what? We have some spots opening up in July. You could sponsor it then if you would like to do that. Just ping me over at david@cisoseries.com. All right. We have exactly just a minute and a half left, so I'm going to ask for 40 seconds from you. Ben, quickly, what's your final thoughts on this topic? And, by the way, are you hiring? We always ask this question. Are you hiring?
I am absolutely hiring, and we're going to be announcing a couple of really cool roles over the next several weeks, so please it sounds like a beg. Please follow me on LinkedIn.
Or are you going to be available to join us for the meetup right after this? Yes?
I'm going to be able to stick around for a bit, yeah.
Yeah, so if you're looking for things, connect with him. I'm sorry, any last thoughts also on the topic? Yes?
Yeah, so the one thing I'd ask people to separate when they're thinking about prioritization is that how hard is this to fix conversation? Because that's the feedback loop into your organization around what should we be doing differently from a technology management perspective. That shouldn't be the thing that drives your prioritization questions. This is too hard to do, therefore deprioritize.
All right, Ed, just a few seconds. I know you're hiring, so I'll make a plug for you. Kenna Security is hiring, and just go there. I'm assuming there's a Kenna Security job board, yes?
Yes,
All right.
there is.
Any final thoughts on this topic of prioritization?
Yeah, so I would say, like anything in security, whether it's this or any other topic, I'm a big fan of incremental improvements and baby steps, right? So if you are doing this today, strive to be 10% better tomorrow in 90 days. Strive to be 10% better in 180 days, but always continuously improve because it's a long journey.
And hence why we asked the 10% better question. Well, we are at the end of the show. I got to thank our guest, Ed Bellis, CTO and co-founder of Canada Security and the CISO over at Canada Life. That would be Ben Shapiro. Thank you, everybody. Click on the bottom of the screen and join us